So hello, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Meadows, and I'm a vice president with the Citizens Network of Protection. And I want to welcome you all. It's just wonderful to be with you here tonight. Thank you so much for being here. And to start us off, I'd like to share the goals of the Citizens Network of Protection with you, which is CNP for short. So CNP is a 501c3 nonprofit organization established to assist residents with filing complaints against police officers' misconduct. And our goals include promoting racial and economic justice within the legal system, preventing government overreach and abuse in the area of law enforcement, and upholding civil rights within the community. So we work to identify community stakeholders to form alliances that actively elevate the work and leadership of communities directly impacted by injustice in law enforcement. So that's some of who we are as CNP. And next, I'd like to introduce two of the new board members. Darlene Murray Cannon is a community activist, a lifelong Evanstonian, and a Second Ward resident. She's a former aldermanic candidate for the Second Ward. And Darlene is executive director of Feeding the Village Evanston and a current board member of the Democratic Party of Evanston. So it's great to see you here, Darlene. A second new board member is Nick Korzanowski. And Nick is a longtime Third Ward resident and a father of two. He's been an activist in Evanston for many years, and you may have seen Nick's face around town as being a board member of Indivisible, Southeast Evanston Association, and Community Alliance for Better Government. Nick has run for District 65 School Board and Third Ward Alderman. So it's great to see you here as well, Nick. And now Nick's going to introduce our host for tonight's program, who is our third new board member with the Citizens Network of Protection.
Thank you. So our third new board member, Kevin Brown, is the Director of Policy, Advocacy, and Legislative Affairs at the SAFER Foundation, known as SAFER. He's got it in his background there, where he manages a team of experts developing criminal justice, public policy, and legislative reforms for people impacted by the criminal legal system. Prior to his role at SAFER, he served for 8 years as the Youth and Young Adult Division Manager at the City of Evanston. And in Evanston, Brown helped build a coalition of community-based agencies, school districts, nonprofits, and private businesses to implement a citywide violence reduction initiative that led to a 200% decrease in violence, theft, and drug-related arrests for 16 to 24-year-olds between 2012 and 2018. Kevin has a rich and diverse background in law, policy, education, and workforce development and training. He received his Juris Doctorate degree at Washington University in St. Louis, a Master's of Arts in Theology from Western Seminary in Portland, and his Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science from Northwestern University. He's an executive board member of the Evanston North Shore National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, a board member of the Democratic Party of Evanston, and volunteers across the Chicagoland area supporting a wide variety of social justice initiatives and organizations. And with that, let's turn it on over to Kevin.
Thank you, Nick, for that kind introduction. Appreciate the opportunity to serve here for Citizens Network of Protection. So hopefully my words are coming through. In the Zoom era, you never know. The word is always you're on mute or something of that nature. Anyway, thank you again. And I have the very great pleasure this evening of introducing two individuals who are just stellar people, committed to the community, committed to values of social justice. And we are really privileged this evening to have them on to talk about and to help Evanston think about what would be required in recruiting a new police chief, and really looking at their experiences working in their specific communities on police reform and criminal justice issues. The first guest that we have two guests, Ms. Iris Roley. Did I pronounce that correctly? Yes, okay, Ms. Iris Roley and Mr. Willie E. Bell. Ms. Iris Roley was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. And Iris is a wife of 23 years to Jesse Roley, a mother of 3, grandmother of 5. And she's a proud partner of Roadshow Awards and Graphics, the only Black-owned engraving company in her region. And her company provides promotional items and awards, trophies, plaques, custom apparel, and signage for the past 15 years or so. As a child, she was developed as an entrepreneur and a social activist. Her grandfather, Big David Kimbrew, owned a bail bonding business. And her grandmother, Vivian Kimbrew, was a nurse and social activist who not only opposed and fought mistreatment of Black people in the city, but also fought across the country. In addition to her grandparents, Iris got her schooling early from the famous Black House located in Avondale, formerly known as Rockdale Temple. She's an original member of the Cincinnati Black United Front, and as a project manager for the Cincinnati Black United Front, in November of 2000, she implemented a plan of action to address the wrongful deaths of 2 unarmed Black men by the Cincinnati Police Department. Iris and the Cincinnati Black United Front led the effort to mobilize the Cincinnati African American community to report, collect, and document over 400 instances of police brutality and misconduct. She's been invited to speak and consult in many cities, including New York, where she consulted with attorneys and community organizers, plaintiffs, and city officials on the elimination of the horrible stop and frisk policies. Other cities like Ferguson, Baltimore, Cleveland, Milwaukee, and even Puerto Rico. She's graciously giving her life and dedicated to the reform of police departments and the implementation of public policy. She currently lends her talents and time to various boards like the Amos Project, City Managers Advisory Board, the Police Chief Advisory Board, the Community Police Partnering Center, the Unofficial Juvenile Court in Madisonville, and the Summer Enrichment Program, Summer Math and Science Program, just to name a few. We would just warmly greet and welcome Ms. Roley to our community in Evanston. And after she speaks for about 15 minutes, we'll introduce our second speaker. So welcome, Ms. Roley. We appreciate your presence.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate being here. Thank you. But I am also a student of my aunt, so I cannot allow an elder not to be introduced. And if the Druthers and Miss Betty Esther is the only person I see here that may be a little older and wiser that can shut me down and say we're not gonna adjust our way we do things. But for me, my soul will not allow me to speak before our elder, Mr. Bell.
Oh, well, let's introduce Brother Willie Bell, who we are privileged to have here tonight with us. Mr. Bell, he's a native of Hernando, Mississippi, migrated to Detroit at an early age, and he graduated from Northeastern High School. Joined the United States military in 1966. I saw that, Mr. Bell. You may have served with my dad, who also did 2 tours in Vietnam, right around the time that you were there in the 1st Air Cavalry Division. He was stationed in Vietnam for a portion of his tenure in the service. He was honorably discharged in 1969 after attaining the rank of sergeant. And in August of 1971, Commissioner Bell joined the Detroit Police Department and served the department and city for 32 years as a sworn officer. He retired in 2003 at the rank of lieutenant Commissioner. And Mr. Bell has dedicated his life and career to promoting justice, fairness, and effectiveness in law enforcement, with an emphasis on how it impacts issues facing the community. He contributes his time and his talent to youth organizations, civic and community groups. And he's married and the father of 2 daughters and 1 granddaughter, serves his church, Plymouth United Church of Christ, as an ordained deacon. Commissioner Bell holds a bachelor's degree from Central Michigan University. He's a 40-year resident of the East English Village and currently serves as chair of the Board of Police Commissioners. Welcome, Brother Bell. We're really honored and privileged to have you here tonight in Evanston, Illinois. Welcome.
Thank you, Brother Brown, and for that great introduction. And thank you, my sister Roley, for giving me the privilege, but I appreciate that. I just want to say I'm really enthused to have this engagement with you this afternoon on Zoom, because it's a technology that we can reach out across this country without leaving your living room or office, more or less. But I just want to say my background started in Vietnam due to the fact that I was in the first air cav, and I'm a product of Memphis, Tennessee, Mississippi, which is the first major town, with my town. And Dr. King was shot and killed in Memphis at the Lorraine Hotel, Motel. And we were sad, but quite a few of my white office counterparts, they celebrated. And we wanted to respond, but being a mature guy versus some of the guys at 18, 19, I said, well, we should make a difference when we get back in the world. And your father would know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He wouldn't know what I'm talking about. So on that note, I was reluctant to join the police department after I got out of service. I wanted to go into skilled trades, but as you well know, General Motors wasn't too friendly, and I had applied for apprenticeship, and they said I had to start all over, notwithstanding my military service. I had to start over from the beginning, take the exam and stuff. So I said, thanks, but no thanks. I think I'll go in a different direction. So therefore, I ended up joining. It took me about a year in terms of filling out the paperwork, because I still wasn't enthused, but some of my high school mates sort of encouraged me. They was also military veteran. So on that note, my career started with the incident of stress in Detroit. That decoy unit shot 10 or 12 young Black males without a weapon, et cetera. And Kenny Cockrell, who's a late attorney, it just really brought that to my attention and others in terms of going to those community forums. I said, what did I get into? So on that note, it sort of enlightened me, but I wanted to keep my bond since Vietnam. So we started a Black police association called the Concerned Police Officers for Equal Justice. They had a older organization started in '63, but as you know, as Young Turks, we thought they was not radical enough, they were not progressive. But later on, 10 years later, we sort of merged the two. The issue of policing, when you're talking about, I'm gonna get to the heart and soul of what we're dealing with this evening, is that I served from '71 to 2003, the first 20 years, primarily with one police chief. We had, as you well know, African American, Coleman Young, who ran on a platform of police reform, and he achieved that goal in terms of hiring, recruiting, promotion, affirmative action program. So on that note, we had the opportunity to transform a predominant white police department. When I was in high school, I'm just dating myself, 1963, when I came out, there were 5,000 police officers. There was only 100 Black officers, even though they started hiring in the 50s, but we was restricted. It wasn't too popular to be police officers, and they didn't really gravitate to giving us that opportunity. So when you talk about the process, we got to understand the historic background. In most cases in America, even today, police chief are appointed by the mayor. And that was the case starting with Coleman Young in Detroit. Before that, we had police commissioner, one person. They changed the title of police chief. And thereafter, in the last 15 years before Chief Craig, we had 7 different police chief, or he had several different mayors. So there was very little input. The mayor designate who would be chief of police. And the community could raise those concerns, but it was the mayor's decision primarily on his watch. But the city charter changed in 2012. It said that the police chief is responsibility given to the Board of Police Commission, which I'm one of 11 commissioners, 7 are elected, 4 appointed, that we have the opportunity on the city charter to select a search firm, a national search firm, and from there, you come up with 3 candidates. And that's just happened recently this year. The chief unexpectedly resigned, and we went through a national search. We had about 90 candidates. We did not view all these candidates, but the search firm went through that process. But we had input. We meet weekly, which is a grueling schedule, but the community can come out in a 2-hour half of meeting to have input. And they was very vocal, and we was pretty much represent the community because 7 of us elected throughout the city of Detroit. So we're very sensitive to the community. That's why we engaged since 1974. On that note, when you're talking about background, you naturally have to have a law enforcement background. And from there, you have to have executive experience in terms of, you can't just came from the rank and file like me as a lieutenant. Normally, you're not gonna make a chief of police unless you go to small town USA. But in that process, you have to have professional experience. You have to understand the community. You have to have the education and achievement, as you well know. I think you should be attuned to the issue that we have. Our chief that we just hired, the mayor, I should say hired, we were very supportive. He has a master's in mental illness, and that's rather unique. He's also came for 1 year, almost 1 year, of being picked from the Detroit Police Department to be the director of civil rights in Michigan. That is unique. That is historic. So that's the type of background. And plus, he was an 8-year veteran of the assistant chief, and he pretty much managed the Senate agreement in Detroit under the Justice Department. So he was heavily involved with that. So that in my 8 years of interaction with him, he was the most qualified, and that was my recommendation. We didn't get any opposition to him. They just want to make sure we had a national search, but he was appointed interim chief. But his credentials impeccable in terms of his involvement, from civil rights sector. But that sort of coincide with my awareness to, I served a couple of terms on the NWC Board of Directors. I served on Black DABO, which is Association of Black Organizations, UAW. So I've been involved. Some people say, well, you've been an ex-cop. Well, you have to keep in mind that ex-cops police officers can only be scrutinized and go through the process by other cops, right? Internal Affairs is our police officer. And we have seen a drastic change in that whole concept. You see police officers now being indicted. You see someone being fired, and you see someone going to prison. That has happened in Detroit about 15 years ago with an incident. And those 2 officers were unheard of in this country, went to prison. So on that, when we talk about the issue that we're dealing with, whether it be Black Lives Matter or facial recognition or issue in the community in terms of constitutional police, those issues are in the forefront of the community. They're also in the forefront of the Board of Police Commission in Detroit, because we have to listen to the community because we engage the community. So traditionally they had 5 commissioners, they were all appointees. But I'm not an appointee, I'm one of the 7 that's elected, and I have to run to get elected. So I have to face the people in that 4-year time period. But I mentioned that they have to have that type of background because policing is a big part of the city budget, as you well know. Significant part of how they manage the department. And somewhere along the line, you have to have the skill set. You have to deal with the unions. You have to deal with the community. You have to deal with all type of issues that in law enforcement now. So the issue about chokehold, the issue about no-knock, Chief, how are you going to handle those issues? How are you going to, and you have to show some background, you have to show initiative to the people in terms of being hired. The mayor understand that now. That was not the case 10 years ago, but now I think we have a mayor who understands those issues because we've been engaging. We've been engaging the mayor for the last 8 years. We meet bi-monthly, we met monthly until we got to understand. Initially, he did not. But as you well know, even though there's been debatable about civilian board, but we have some clout. We don't have enough in terms of discipline. Some people think we're able to fire these police officers, but no, we can't fire. That's the chief in the collective bargain, etc. But in Detroit, we can suspend it without pay. We can suspend without pay if the chief make a recommendation. Most case recommendation is a serious matter in terms of felony charge or high misdemeanor. So we don't take that light. We go into closed session, we give that officer opportunity to present his case along with the department. So then we make a decision in the public. We have to, all our decisions are under the Open Meeting Act in terms of that process. So I look at chief is it's drastic change. We see women's in policing now. We had one in Dallas. We got even in Memphis, Tennessee, they hired their first female. In Columbus, Ohio, one of our former deputy chief and captain is now chief and assistant chief there. The chief was able to bring in their own team. That normally don't happen. So we are pleased. The process is changing. We would like the chief to have more authority, and we would like to have more authority on discipline. The charter say one thing, but reality, the collective bargaining has wiped that out. That's something that we're trying to fight for. I think those key issues you have to wage with the mayor and the chief. You just can't take the chief by himself because he worked for the mayor. He can hire and fire the chief of police. We don't have that authority. We don't have that authority. Most cities don't have that authority. In LA, they got term limits for a chief of police. That board can only serve 10 years, 5-year term, that type of thing. That's out of the Chief Darrell Gates situation with the chokehold. Right. So when we tie all those in, the specialized training got to be ongoing. I posed the question, are you a member of the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Executives? Noble. That goes to show he should be conscious, just not the IACP, not the FOP. Are you aware of that organization? If you're not a member, why not? Because they sort of set the tone in terms of Black police leadership in this country. So those issues and how do we handle instance of riot control? Those, I mean, it's sort of crucial in terms of people that come together, protest. We know what happened in the South and how to use police dogs and you restrain. So what I'm gonna close this out by saying, Detroit PD is more accountable under the Justice Department scrutiny for about 12 years of the consent agreement to impact arrests, force, housing, all that. Because we used to arrest people and go to a club and everybody go down and you held until you know Junebug. You might not know Junebug name, but the bottom line, that's how police, they would corral you and take you downtown and hold you indefinite, you know, or they move you around the different precincts. So I witnessed a whole lot of wrongdoing in reference to police, and that's why I'm engaging. I try to offer my service. I'm running for re-election one more time. I feel as though I want to finish out on a positive note because the Justice Department has an impact. I serve in the National Social, NACO, the National Social Law Enforcement, dealing with that. So you can see we moving in a certain direction. I just want to be part of that push, And I think the responsibility of Black organization, not just to protest, they need to get involved with the president, with the vice president, the Justice Department, Attorney General. You just cannot protest. You have to impact policy. That's one of the things we do. Everything that revolves around policy. What are the rules and regulations? That's how you make these officers accountable. Because you have to cite that. You just cannot carry to say, well, he violated the rule X. No, as you well know, you have to cite it. No different than how the court of law works. You have to have a charge that meet the criteria or the statute or whatever. And the same thing with police. I think my time is up. Are we doing okay? I'm close out on that note.
Yes,
I'm here to entertain any question, concern that you might have.
Before we get into any questions, we're going to let Ms.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Go.
Yes.
And then right after that, we'll open it up and let people ask questions. We have a lot of questions, so Ms. Showes-Roley.
All right, thank you so very much. And thank you for that, Mr. Bell. How do I follow that? Let me just say to you all, I don't know, this is my first time laying eyes on Miss Betty Esther, but she has been in Evanston, Indiana, telling Iris what to do in Cincinnati, Ohio for about 3 or 4 years now. So y'all, I know y'all are in good hands, and I appreciate the elder calling me and not forgetting that a Black organization in the city of Cincinnati did some tremendous work and led the nation in that particular work. Let me just start here. My name is Iris Roley. I've been married to Jesse Roley 27 years. So that I'm gonna have to update that bio. Yes. We have 3 sons and 5 grandkids. And it is being the owner of my business that has allowed me to be as Black and indignant and vocal and loud in the streets, in the federal courtroom, in the negotiation room, and still at the table. That was 20 years ago this April. I don't know of any volunteers. Yes, I do, because we do it all the time. But in this particular space, police accountability, transparency, we have been doing this work for 20 years. Well, let me say the Cincinnati Black United Front, we organized because 14 of our downtown restaurants decided that they were going to close during the time when the Jazz Festival, and I'm going to start dating myself. I know folks say black don't crack, but when you start naming things, folks can say you're about 50, 60 years old. That's okay. Because with
That's
age
all right.
comes wisdom, right?
That's all right.
So these 14 downtown restaurants decided that they were going to close during the #1 revenue generating event that comes to the city of Cincinnati. It is in its would have been its 57th year this year, but for COVID. And that is the Jazz Festival, the music festival, which is very attractive to Black folks across the Midwest, even folk from Indiana, Chicago, Detroit, Cincinnati, Louisville, Missouri, New York. Folk come from all over. 65,000 people. 2 years ago, when we did have our Jazz Festival, we brought in $110 million. 90 million went to hotels, 10 million went to food, purchases of clothes and other things. We're not even talking about parking, which was 1.5 million. I say that to say that is the reason why we got into this business. And that was in the summer of 2000. In November of 2000, November 7th to be exact, the day after the polls closed and we were having election, there were 2 Black men killed in the city of Cincinnati. And I want you all to stay with me and remember this story. And if you don't, I can send it to you. The 13th was Jeffrey Irons. Jeffrey Irons was a Black man who suffered from mental health challenges. He stole something from a local grocery store, ran, hid under a car, and was shot and killed under that car. Within the same 24 hours, we had Roger Owensby Jr. Roger Owensby Jr. had served 2 tours of duty, was home 6 months, the only parent taking care of his 10-year-old daughter at that time, and was killed 2 blocks away from his parents' home. And I said Roger had just got home from his 2nd tour of duty. Where Roger was murdered by not just Cincinnati police, but other police municipalities, because there are several municipalities throughout the city. There isn't just one. So I want you all to really begin to think about where you live and who surrounds you. Because as you require things of your own police department and your own police administration in your own city, you need to think about branching those things out to other connecting municipalities. Every one of those have a mutual aid agreement with all police agencies in and around in your town. So figure out how you can start spreading this out and even how they select their chief. You'd be surprised, people really are looking for things that work, save money, and save lives. Well, as I said, my business is 2 blocks down from where Roger was murdered. So there isn't a day that goes by that I don't have to see the blood. I don't have to see the children that were there, and I don't have to see the impact on our community. The Black community was incensed, as in most Black communities across this nation and across the globe are incensed when we see horrible deaths. And just when you think you've seen the most egregious, something else happens, like Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, but I digress. So the community came to us and said, you guys have been out, you've been loud, you've been in the streets, you've been protesting these restaurants because they came up with a whole list about why they weren't going to serve Black people in our town. And we were just offended. We were offended that there's a 1964 impaction ordinance that says you cannot shut your business down because people of a certain race are coming to town. If you can't figure out how to feed me some chicken and French fries, that's your fault, not mine. You had gotten my tax dollar for furniture, fixture, and equipment and facade work, and you decided to shut your doors. It was on in the city of Cincinnati. So when the 2 murders happened within 24 hours and the Black community came to us and said, can y'all please do something? We thought, okay, we will. Not knowing that this is what we were going to get into. We were coming off the heels of the Pittsburgh consent decree. We had studied it. We were studiers of history, studiers of the movement, and we were very righteous and indignant. At that time, Reverend Damon III was our president. He is pastor of New Prospect Baptist Church. And of course, my husband was right beside me, our children, and the whole Black community. So what we did, we were meeting for every Tuesday for months, and then we had 2 attorneys come knocking at our door. And I don't want anybody to get offended. I just want you to understand trauma, work, more trauma, and more work. And these 2 attorneys were white attorneys. We were very clear that we wanted representation to look like us, so that the lens would represent the thought, the trauma, the pain, and then the reciprocity. Because in the city of Cincinnati, as the taxpayer, that makes me the boss. And I want a return on my investment. I want the same return that the same folks get in Hyde Park, which is a very affluent white neighborhood. I want the same return on investment that the white folks get in Oakley, another affluent white neighborhood. I want the same thing that white folks on the west side of town get. Black people were sick and tired of being sick and tired in the city of Cincinnati, and we were going to take up that mantle. Now, we were in November of 2000, right? We allowed the 2 attorneys to come in and say, okay, we will work with you. What they brought in the door with them was a 33-year history of policing of the Black community and police in the city of Cincinnati from 1967 to 2000. They had tracked 13 blue ribbon panels, 13 sets of broken promises. They had tracked all the deaths, and they came to us and said, we want to help y'all. We kept saying, no, again, we need some Black attorneys. Now, I think Miss Betty said that one, you all talked to the ACLU. One was from the ACLU, his name was Scott Greenwood, a very great attorney. And then the other was Al Gerhardstein. Al Gerhardstein and Showes-Roley have not stopped. We are still at the table, still pushing for equity, transferables, transparency, and accountability. And then we went and we got Ken Lawson. He was our litigator, the Black attorney that everybody knew as the law dog. So we decided that we had the legal team of legal teams, and we did. We had very smart, capable, connected attorneys. If you don't have one, get some now. Because there is somebody that is keeping the history of Evanston, Indiana. There is somebody that knows the laws that are on the books. There's somebody that knows the administrative codes of policing. There's somebody that knows the protocol. So what type of city do you have? Do you have the city manager style, CEO style of government? Do you have a mayor style? So all of these things are important because they tell you who's on first, who's on second, and who's on third. Who can fire whom and who's responsible for what. That's the second thing that you need to understand, how your city government works. And then the next thing we had to determine was what was the state's implication of what we were going to do, right? So we had an opportunity of just saying, okay, well, hey, we want to settle some cases because there were cases in the Southern District Federal Court of which we ended up filing it. But that particular judge told us, if you come back with enough evidence, we will turn it into a class action. That is when I devised a plan in the month of January. Y'all can look at me and see I don't like January. There's nothing about cold that I like. Ice, no rain, none of that. So it was difficult, but we did it. So for 5 Saturdays, I set up 5 very safe spaces because even in the year 2001, there was a serious, folk were scared to talk about police, and no one had ever asked the Cincinnati Black community how they felt about police. I'm giving you this history because there's more to it than just the police, because you got the administrative side of police, so you got to balance the power out. So long story short, we took all the complaints from the community, turned them into policies, went into federal court, created what we call the collaborative agreement. We have the only 2 agreements like it in the country. We have our DOJ agreement between the city and the DOJ, and then we have the collaborative, and both of these agreements are intertwined. So one can't work without the other, right? So it supports it. So where the use of force policies and contendrums and matrices and discipline and all those things rest inside of the CA. But what the collaborative gives us is a class of people that have been impacted. The class reads all African Americans and or Black people who are perceived as such, who live and walk on the streets and thoroughfares of the city of Cincinnati, and who come into contact with Cincinnati police officers and their agents. That was critical. So we do all that. The first round of the CA, after we went through 18 months of negotiation of how we were going to do this, and we placed Black people in the center of how strategies are determined with police. See, you can't just hire a police chief to say, we want you to do this. Some of that stuff that you want to have done has to be in place somewhere with somebody already. Right? So if you want to be able to hire a chief, like we hired Chief Craig, and we're glad that he gone because he done lost his mind, seems like. I sent him a note and said, what in the world happened to you? But we grateful. You went on back to the little D and left Cincinnati. and that's something to think about now as we're having this very important conversation. How do you know political affiliation of a chief? Because I never thought to ask that until Chief Craig made that declaration. It blew my mind. But now I understand some of the moves that he made while he was here. He was only here for 2 years. Now, how did Chief Craig get here? Because he was our first outside chief. Part of our strategy was to change that as well. So in the first iteration, we changed over 250 policies, procedures, and guidelines of policing in the city of Cincinnati. We also went after how to hire and where to hire a police chief from. So I'm just going to add some things to what Mr. Bell said. So we changed the charter. So we put in issue 5. Issue 5 says, hey, Cincinnati, guess what? Y'all little town down by the river that's acting mid-size, but thinking small size, because we were selecting chiefs from the west side of town. And people would tell you this story. Oh, well, we get our chiefs from the west side from one of the Catholic schools. And we know who comes from the Catholic schools. It's not Black folk that's gonna rise through the ranks that way. It was white folks. So we went and we changed the charter, wrote special legislation to be able to go and hire and do a national search. I think at that time, we were one of 6 cities left that didn't have the apparatus to do a national search. That's insane. And if that's where Evanston, Indiana is today, that's just out of the scope of where we are in 21st century. So you need to be able to have a national search for several reasons. One, you get to compare and contrast education, training, knowledge, diversity. Where has one been? You get to look inside of jackets. So I sat on the hiring selection committee for the first outside chief. It was our first Black chief in the history of our police department, which was over 100 years old. Now that does not support the population by the Census Bureau, because at that time, Black folk were doggone near 47% of the city. And we had never had a Black police chief. Come on, let's catch up, really? So we put issue 5 on the ballot so the city could vote on it, so that there would be no ambiguity, there will be no fight back. There will be people who could coalesce and talk about why we needed to do it. And I think the city at that time thought and knew we needed to go out. What it has done, we're about to embark on our next selection of a chief because this chief is about to retire. We will be sitting as part of the design. I have a meeting with the city manager now. She's the CEO of the city next week to help come up with the design of what that looks like. So let me just offer up some things because I think I may be getting close to my time. So one, I also want to say to you, Mr. Bell, Saul Green was our federal monitor. Saul Green is from Detroit as well. And then he came back to do our refresh work with us to do an assessment on CPD, the city, and the community in 2017, and left us with a whole host of recommendations that we're still fighting to get done. Let me offer a couple of things that you want to make sure you have on your list of expectations. The expectations, what do you expect out of a chief? What are the needs that you need, that the chief needs to be able to address? And how will they do that? And then next, you guys, what do you want? Does it matter if it's a Black chief or female chief, although females police better? I'm just here to tell y'all, science proves it. We do it best. What do you actually want? So I would suggest that this group and whomever else is part of this, sit down and really hammer out what it is that you want. 2, whatever you come up with, you guys negotiate that amongst yourselves, and I'll certainly come back and say, yay, nay, that makes sense, or it doesn't. And I'm going to be real raw with y'all because it's a matter of time. You don't have a lot. But also stress to whomever in the city administration that the search firm be as equally diverse and that you see their record also. That matters, because if the notices don't go out to Noble or NACRO or HBCUs, where Black folk are or where women are, if it doesn't make it out far and wide, you'll get the same old thing back. So you, in order to get a diverse pool of candidates, that notice has to go out. And if it's going to be put in the hands of a search firm, you need to know that search firm's record. You need to know their inclusion record, their diversity record. You need to know what they have done before. And you need to be okay with that. And if you're not okay with that, you need to be okay with finding a search firm. We've done that. And we'll do it again in the city to ensure that we get the best possible candidate that we can get. You need a chief that's going to be able to come in and negotiate, as what Mr. Bell said. So think about it as a house with children. The chief is going to be the big dad. He's going to have a wife. That's going to be the command staff right behind him. Then they're going to have children. That's going to be the captains, the lieutenants, the sergeant, and then the rank and file. All those people can make or break the chief. Politics are in policing today. They're in policing heavily. The FOP wants one thing one way, and communities want something different. And all of them work for communities. So that needs to be established. I fight with our FOP president every day, still, because he believes that policing was somehow given to white men. And I don't know, that's historic, but we're in a whole nother century. So we got something for him. However, you need to be able to determine that if that individual has what it takes to move a force, because they can stop it. They can stop it. They can get one fired. They can interrupt. They can slow down. They cannot police, or they can escalate. This is a very difficult task. And it's always the people on the street that get the brunt of the BS. So you need to know that if they don't work, then what's the recall measure? What happens? And I would also ask that, and this is something that we did so that we could mitigate the division, right? So what the collaborative helped us do, what we did do was we empowered 8 stakeholder groups. And one of those groups were police officers and their families. We asked them how they felt. We asked 8 different stakeholder groups how they felt about policing. And you know what, guys, in 2001, I wish I had that grid, I would show it to you. We all almost said the same thing. Even though we were all angry, everybody wanted to live, everybody wanted to go home and take care of their family. Nobody wanted to die, nobody wanted to get shot, nobody wanted to kill anybody. So the work was up to us, and how then do we do that? So once you begin to help bridge these things, because I bet your charter says you have to have police. So even though we have the defund movement and reimagine all those things, you just can't simply get rid of them. Your charter probably won't let you. But what your charter will allow you to do is to change some of those administrative codes. I think we may be the only organization, and we just did this last year, that was able to impact the FOP contract. We did that last year. We submitted 6 new provisions. We got 3 in. And 2, all 3 of them were really important. One was the peer review. The peer review says if the chief disciplines you, that Iris could go to Kevin and Karen, and Kevin and Karen can say, okay, forget that and throw it out. And it never hits your jacket. And so we often wonder, well, how did this police officer make it? When they do something really crazy because of stuff like that. So we got that removed. That is no longer available. We got arbitration adjusted. It used to be where one arbitrator was shot for by the FOP, and we often wondered why decisions were in favor of police. Because one arbitrator. So the city negotiated that we could, out of 15, we could select 3, and that their decisions would be anonymous. The third thing we got was the expungement record. We wanted any officer that came in contact with the citizen and not civilian, because that's a military term, Mr. Bell, that came in contact with the citizen, that it stay in their jacket forever. It was 3 years. The city negotiated it for 7. So we were cool with that because we felt as though if outliers did something in 2021, they probably would do something within the 7 years. So you still are able, and we did that in the time where we were proactive, because that's what the agreement does. It makes you proactive in the face of continuous improvement of policing and community. The other part of our agreement allowed us to deal with crime and disorder. So you have to work with police, right? You have to be able to work with police and all of the other city departments, because a lot of things around crime and disorder ain't got nothing to do with police. So sometimes we misuse it, but that's a whole nother thing. But you need a chief that is at least fluent in President Obama's 21st century policing strategies. And one of the places that he stopped was here in Cincinnati, because we had done the work, the community had done the heavy lifting and the work here. And the police will tell you, the ones that have been around, they're like, yeah, well, you know, they did it and they wrote it and they put it in place, and they will hammer us when we act inappropriately. Oh, I'm sorry. The expungement. Oh, I said that from 3 to 7. Okay, I said that. I wanted to make sure I got that out. So, and the chief was like, go, Iris, do it. I appreciate you getting that work done. You need a chief that can take a call from a Miss Betty. Ask her not disrespect her, because I'll have to come to Evanston, Indiana, and punch him in his face or her. So you need someone that is going to be, and that understands that it's critical to talk to the Black community specifically. Whether it's somebody at the NAACP, the Urban League, or in this group, there needs to be that level of communication. The other thing that I'll say, and then I'll stop, but I think that it's very critical, is that you all see the description of what's in for the chief. What does your city say the chief's responsibilities are? And then how can he or she be fired and or terminated? So you need to understand everything about this contract that you can. And you want some power in this process. And that would be the last thing, is that somebody is part of the process from this group, from start to finish.
That was very rich. All of this information. I want to thank both Brother Bell and Ms. Roley for delivering some really impactful stuff. But I also know this is a very inquisitive group, and I want to give people an opportunity to engage with questions that you all may have. So you can either put up your hand or jump in. We'll open it up for questions of our guests this evening.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'd like to know, and before the search and the part of the process, do you think it should be how much power the chief really has?
I think you should understand how much power he really does. I'm sorry, go ahead and
Right.
finish with your question. Yes.
No, because I think that's important, especially in the city of Evanston. Because I don't know if I've experienced a whole lot of discrimination here in Evanston. What I notice is that people don't really back like they might have you. They kind of stand back and they're afraid to get involved. And most Black people, and Kevin, I don't know if you can attest to this or not, but most Black people here, you know, they think Black people are bad. So you don't get that support that you're really looking for. That's my experience. And then when dealing with the police chiefs, for the most part, I can say that from what I experienced, their hands are tied and not really understanding like what they can do and what they can't do. They have to they get scrutinized by the public and then also by their officers, you know, and you never know who knows who in Evanston and how connected a police officer could be to an alder person. Because there was a police officer here in Evanston that was very connected to an alder person, and he was horrible. And they finally, at some point, walked him out, you know. So then, not shortly after that, the police chief retired. Was forced to retire. So my thing is, in Evanston, we support everything else around the country. Okay, they were very boisterous in the George Floyd. Something happened in another state, but when the rock is thrown here, we hide and we don't say anything and we don't help each other, and that is very disturbing for me. It's hard to find people that will come out and say, look, we're not going to tolerate any more of this. And then when you do find a group like that, they're scrutinized. So I've been with Betty Esther for a long time with this, and I kind of drifted away because it's very frustrating trying to fight. People find all kind of reasons why you don't talk right, or you don't know this, or you need to stay away from that person because, you know, and then if you are and you do speak out, then you're scrutinized. And then I noticed that Black folks here, they like, oh, who does he think he is? You know, and I'm trying to help you, and I'm trying to help me. I'm trying to help all of us. And it's like, you know, we bite each other in the back, and it is hard. You have people that probably right here on this committee that are just here just to figure out what's going on so they can run back and tell. And so we will let them get this far. And I'm telling you this because I've experienced it, and Betty knows what I'm talking about, okay? So it's just really hard. And Betty's been fighting this fight for years. I remember when she first organized this, and we finally got to this point with a lot of new faces. However, I don't see much being done. Kevin worked for the city of Evanston, and they sure threw him under the bus. And here we are. And if we're seen, it's like, oh, why are you in that group? Oh, well, what's going on over there? Or why are you with him? And so we have all these beasts right here in Evanston that we should be getting rid of, and we can't. I had a white neighbor who called us niggers last summer, and I called the chief, I called everybody, and because his brother used to be a state's attorney and now is a prominent lawyer that lives in Kenilworth, you know, he was able to stay here. But I just said to hell with all that. I called excuse me, I'm sorry for cursing. I just get I'm so sorry.
But this ain't my,
but, you know,
just a guess.
Yeah, you know, I'm sorry, but you know, it wasn't until I reached out to Kevin, help me out. The big general
ACLU. I talked to you about this.
Yeah, no, but not ACLU. I
I
reached
thought you
out to
talked to
the
them.
Attorney
Oh.
General. When I reached
Attorney
out to
Kwame
when I reached out,
Kilpatrick.
yeah, right. When I reached out to the Attorney General, things start happening real quick. You know, but I'm just saying that why should I have to go through all that? You know, why do we have to suffer? And then when I told people about it, it's like, oh yeah, I said I have video of everything, and if y'all don't take care of this, it's gonna be national news. I promise you. Okay, this guy made a cross for my son, said he was gonna hang him on it and all that old, just taunting, you know, and had been doing this to the neighborhood since 2014. How the hell does that go on? Okay, so
because he didn't come up missing a long time ago.
Exactly. So I'm just saying that in looking for a chief, I think it's really important, first of all, to find out like what is his powers, what can he do and what he can't do, and maybe not hold him accountable for the things that he can't do. You know, and
Look,
the people that
Miss Gregory, let me answer this before you. And I told my husband to get in. That's him over there.
Hey.
That's Jesse. You see, there go Miss Betty Esther.
All right.
Our mother. And now let me just say this, Miss Gregory, and I didn't interrupt you, not to be rude, but I want to
No, that's fine.
I want to recognize what you just said. And I think that I don't know who told me that that wasn't going to be the case, but it was the same case here in Cincinnati. So you have people who have been conditioned to be fearful. We often say here in Cincinnati that Black folk believe slavery is still on the books and white folks still believe that they're slave catchers. And that's the mentality. And that's the mentality that you have to deal with. However, there's some good folk on both sides. There's some warriors on both sides, but you got to keep fighting. The only way, what I didn't say to you, Ms. Gregory, what happened was the city and the police were slow to the table in negotiations. So we, part of the Cincinnati Black United Front, we ratcheted up our activism. We used 3 tools. We were in the streets making noise. We were in federal court, not municipal, not in city court. We were in federal court. And then we enacted a sanctions on travel and tourism. Anybody can go run tell that, because that's what we did. Same thing. And it lasted longer than the Montgomery bus boycott. So what we did was we hit the city where the money was coming. And that same very festival that started us is what we shut down for 3 years. So those millions of dollars that Black people would contribute to the economy of the city, which makes the city go like this, stopped abruptly. Now, I know you all won't believe this, but I just have to tell you the fun fact. And in 2001, when the digital divide was wider than the Atlantic Ocean, we were still on typewriter sending and making phone calls to people not to come to Cincinnati. And the very first person that said they would not cross our boycott line was, you tell them who it was, Jesse.
Bill Cosby.
Whoopi Goldberg, Mary J. Blige, the National Baptist Convention took $1 million hit for us. Prince decided not to come to Cincinnati because we drew a line. And at some point, you got to ratchet up your strategy. And that may not be for everybody to know if they're going to, but it's going to come out eventually. Right. And we were very clear about what we were doing. And although there were 4 other organizations that were on the ground, and we were talking about a plethora of issues that impact Black people, because there's a plethora of things, but policing was at the top of the list. Policing is no longer at the top of the list for Black people in the city of Cincinnati. So it was hitting them in the pocket to the people that really run the city, not the ones that you vote for, but the ones that really run the town, that recognize this group is doing some serious, not just branding damage of the city of Cincinnati, because everybody was like, oh, Cincinnati's just a sleepy little town. But when we put the spotlight on what was actually happening, nobody likes that kind of shame. And they've been trying to rebuild ever since.
I think, Sister Gregory, your question also is a leadership question. So I wanted to get a thought from Brother Bell, just really on what both Sister Roley and Brother Bell have been talking about. But I wanted to hear his perspective on leadership.
Well, let me say this. Ms. Roley mentioned it. Policing is a political animal. It starts with politics. Now, Cincinnati is rather unique. You hit them in the pocketbook, but Detroit is predominantly Black city, and we have had a Black police chief since 1974. The first chief of progressive mayor, Coleman Young, was white. He said the Black community and white community people are not ready for a Black chief. But thereafter, 2 years later, he appointed a Black chief, and ever since then, we have had a Black police chief. But that don't mean the problems went away, because I mentioned to you about in 2003 and 2004, we went on this agreement that last 14 years on the 6 different Black police chiefs. In that whole process. So I would say you have to be active involved in the political process, because chief, basically you can do a search, but they are going to be appointed by the mayor, unless your charter says city manager. That's the impact of a chief. The only time a chief is fired when he become a liability to that mayor political involvement. You understand? So that's crucial when you hit on certain points. collective bargaining, unions. Well, unfortunately, the union in Detroit don't have the clout because they have moved outside of the city. They don't vote in Detroit anymore. So they are weakened, but police union is a powerful entity. When Roley talked about collective bargaining, arbitrator, we had an arbitrator, he was arbitrating since the 70s when I was on the job. And if the union's happy with him, he's there. So only way you can change that is collective bargain. Who engaged collective bargaining? The mayor primarily and his negotiation team. So you have to look at it political process first of all, because police chiefs are hired and fired by the mayor, not the people. Unless you say impact the pocketbook or financial situation, but that's not the case. Cincinnati is rather unique in that sense. But in Detroit, it's a totally different animal in terms of predominant Black city. Now, keep in mind that police reform is not an issue in the white community. It's only an issue in Black American cities. You follow me?
Yeah.
It's not an issue in any other white community. They don't have an issue. So when you look at those, look what happened in Chicago, a shooting of a police officer, and they turned their back on the Black female mayor, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Okay, that goes to show you their contempt in terms of her leadership, whatever it is. But just the idea, she's trying to advocate, and she came out of civilian board that monitors the police. So there was not a whole lot of love, but they didn't have no choice in terms of she was elected politically in Chicago. So on that note, I say you have to engage all the enemies. You hit on all those key points. 21st century, the issue about what we do. Now, body cameras and video cameras have changed the whole landscape of policing in America. Mr. Floyd did not die in vain. Unfortunate is his daughter's told the president of the United States, my father changed the world. And that is impact because now we can see in details in a matter of seconds of what has transpired. Before that, police officer word against the citizen word, then the prosecutor buy into, the chief buy into. So you didn't have an opportunity to really get justice. It was pretty much justice is blind. You're right. So on that note, Ms. Gregory, you have to be engaged like you are in different organizations to have an impact. Now we got the NAACP in Detroit, and we brought on fighting for affirmative action. I was the Cincinnati Sixth Court of Appeal, Judge Damon Keefe, a prominent Black judge. He ruled on that, so you can see the NAACP was involved in Detroit, affirmative action. So we don't have those issues in terms of race issue. We just trying to maintain a predominant Black police department. I want to say we did not hire Chief Craig. The Chief Craig was hired by the emergency manager. At the time, we was under that type of restraint, but he was one of the three for recommendation. But the emergency manager made the decision. The mayor did not have that authority at the time. So that's pretty much.
But Mr. Bell, Detroit policing, y'all got issues inside of your police department. So the numbers bear the truth. And so I don't think that there is a police department in the United States of America where one would say that they're satisfied. Policing does impact white people. And let me tell you how. So if you're in the city of Cincinnati that's not insured, when police do something poorly, badly, tragically, when they traumatize people, and people like my husband and myself, when we go sue the city, guess who has to pay for that?
We do.
Taxpayers.
Yeah.
It impacts everybody.
Lawsuits are not a deterrent for police behavior and activity. Trust me.
I get what you're saying, but there is still people who are paying attention to that. They're starting to pay attention to how much money is coming out of their pockets again to pay for bad, unconstitutional policing. And you have to hold those people responsible as well. You asked a critical question, Kevin, about leadership. And so I'm going to try to answer this fairly. And if my husband wants to weigh in, he can. There was a lot of resistance in leadership to us filing a federal lawsuit, Black and white. People, again, and I used a word that we need to start giving a whole lot more grace to, condition. People are conditioned to believe that the state that they're in is the state that they should stay in and be.
Right. Yep.
And people believe that they can't advocate and fight for change. And I don't know where that came from, because since this country has been founded, there's been fight for change.
Yep.
And so we have to be part of that fight. Now everyone, oh my God, the collaborative agreement is the best thing Cincinnati's had in 20 years. Oh my God, it's the best thing. Showes-Roley is the best thing. It's the best thing ever. No, we were just trying to save lives and reduce the human impact from unconstitutional policing by the people that we pay to protect and serve everyone.
Right.
That was our goal. We didn't care what you did when you went home, but when you filled out that application for a job, and this is how things have got to be measured. This is not your right. This is a job. And when you fill out that application for a job, you should not be allowed to be willy-nilly and do whatever you want and cause harm and create chaos. Right. What you have, and I'm sorry I said Evanston, Indiana, it's Evanston, Illinois. It just, sorry about that.
All right.
Thank you, Miss Esther, for correcting me. She texted me in the chat. But what you have to do is keep your eyes on the prize. Yeah. In Montgomery, Alabama, when you couldn't sit on the front of the bus, and they said, we gonna do something different. What they didn't do, what I wish they would have done, was created their own busing system, so that the economics could come back to the community. But they decided to do what we all know as bootleg cabs. We gonna make sure folks got to where they gonna go and not get on the bus. So what you need to do, Ms. Gregory, is some of that noise and chaos you got to shut out. The numbers will bear the fruit of what is actually happening in your town. The citizens will tell you, I will tell you, just to continue to engage citizens. Ever since the pandemic has happened, I do 2 Zoom calls a week, and I go live on Facebook. One is Woke Wednesdays, where we talk about all the other issues that we're dealing with, especially around pandemic, vaccinations, testing, education, all those other things, housing, everything else. But on Fridays, I do Freedom Fridays, policing in the pandemic. And everybody comes on my show, from Cheryl and Eiffel, the leader of the NAACP LDF, to the police chief, to the city manager. There's nobody that will not come and sit that we cannot hold accountable, that is in the place of power, that has the power to make a change, that is responsible to the taxpayers. And so, Ms. Patricia, if you need me to come, I will come. But you just gotta teach people that that matter and that they value. And that they have value. And if you don't believe you do, believe your children do. Believe your grandchildren does. So we're fighting to change policies, procedures, guidelines. Mr. Bell had it right. That's all I do. That's all I talk about. I'm not talking about what somebody like or what it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what I want to make sure the details match the headlines. I want to make sure there's discipline when policy changes occur. We've had body-worn cameras since 2016, we had the conversation with the police. We brought in our own national expert. And so the policy recommendations that came from the community came out of our conversation. We invited the police in. I had the first and only community police conference. It lasted 6 days because I had stuff I needed to get out.
Let me jump in real quick.
Yes,
so Sister Esther, what was your timing on this event? Where are we on time? You're on mute. Sister Betty.
I'm sorry, I keep forgetting I have to click the mic. I'm used to doing this in person. We usually say for an hour. We can go for an hour and a half if we got other people that wish to ask questions. First of all, if our guests can stay till 8:30.
Can we stay?
Yes.
He said we can stay.
Okay, and Mr. Bell, can you stay to 8:30?
Yes, ma'am. I can 8:35. I'm here with you.
Okay.
I'm good. I'm here. I'm at home.
Love you, Mr. Bell.
All right, thank you. So, well, you can get the next person question.
Yeah, do we have other people that have question or comment we want to hear your voice? So I want to give another opportunity for anyone Yes, Elizabeth.
So thank you all so much. This is so informative. I just want to ask you, how do you find out the political stance of a candidate for chief? Because you were saying that's really, but how does one do that?
Well, it's simple as this. As you know, we in an election year in Detroit, perhaps you're not aware of that. And those issues got to be posed to the candidates, and whoever elected mayor got to be followed up. Like I give you an example, I stand by my statement, white America does not concerned about police reform. We have the George Floyd bill in in DC, right?
Yeah.
And it's sitting there because no one on the Republican Party is taking that issue up. They are status quo. It's sitting there, it's been sitting there for the last couple of years. If they were concerned, America would be lobbying for that. But no, it's status quo. So when you look at those issues, like I said, I'm surrounded, I've been in law enforcement 30 some years. The lawsuits are not a deterrence. The IACP, the FOP is a powerful lobbyist. And as you well know, when people talk about the reform of the criminal justice system, it's not coming out of a predominant white community, it's coming out of the Black community. So you have to face those realities. You know, Cincinnati is unique, but getting back to the bus card in Alabama, that was because they shut the bus system down, right?
Mm-hmm.
That hit them in the pocketbook. Then the business owner said, we got to change the climate. They went for 1 year. But in doing anything like Cincinnati is rather unique. I commend my sister and I commend you in terms of the whole effort, but we have to look at America. So with Floyd death, there are just as many incidents of police killings as there were before he died. Are you aware of that? Those
Yes.
are facts.
In Minneapolis?
I'm talking about in this country.
I was just there in Minneapolis helping the activists there.
Just this country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would add to sort of the point that Brother Bell is making here in Illinois, both in Evanston as well as in the city of Chicago. When we look at policing, the city of Chicago's police budget is almost $1.8 billion. And even with all of the, over the last 10 years, the city of Chicago has paid out nearly $1 billion in settlements.
Yes, sir.
So when you talk about this question of police reform, it is a Black and brown concern.
Right.
In the city of Chicago, especially. Evanston mirrors the same thing. Our police budget, all of the talk that people have had about police reform, about defunding, about reallocation of resources, even with all of that, our police budget was also increased last year. So, you know, it's critically important. I think both of you have articulated that we strategize on multiple levels, and policy is a level, legislation is a level, organizing is a level, and we've got to get the right people in the right seats who have some sense of our culture and value our culture, who will make decisions that are affirming to our culture.
But the other thing I offer you,
that's
Kevin,
what's lacking.
the other thing that I offer you is that if you use language is powerful. And because what you're doing is sucking the opportunity of change out of your hands before you even start. So you don't know what you're going to get because you don't know what you can do. You've not done this. So what I offer you is 20 years, unlike any other city, we offer you 20 years of accountability, not reform, accountability measures. Because again, we're talking about jobs. We're talking about people doing jobs. I don't have the luxury of just saying or just worrying about who's worried about this. What I have the luxury of doing, because we own our own business, is making sure that I'm at the table and making sure that I'm open to people who want to be about this business. And the best attorney that we've ever had in this entire process is a white guy.
Yeah.
And he's a civil rights attorney. And at the same time he was fighting for these accountability tools, he was fighting for the LGBTQIA community. So you can find some people in pockets, and it's not, to Ms. Gregory, it's not always going to be the masses. It's the small group of us that gets it done.
Always. Yeah,
it's the smaller group. But what you have to do is speak life into what you're seeking. Until we can get to the point, because neither one of us said this, Mr. Bell or myself said this, but this is the secret sauce. This is the sauce that's in the mayonnaise, like they had an Undercover Brother. So you would have had to see the movie to get that joke. Because I hear you, Patricia, because I fight with Black men all the time. I think they just be scared for me and worried about me, right? They'd be scared. They just be like, you out here with your husband? And I'm like, somebody got to make the donut so I can be out here. However, what I was going to say is that every day I wake up, my ancestors tell me to get up and do it.
That's why we're
do
here.
something. Exactly. And so I am proud that you all are here, and get up and do it for the babies, Black or white. So now what we're seeing in America is not just the killing, the murdering of Black and brown people, but we see some white folk up in there too.
Yep.
And so it is about, the problem is how you see the problem and how you're going to address it. So what we offer you is 20 years of all of what we're talking about. I can go line by line, a policy that we done changed. I can tell you, I just told you Chief Craig was our first chief out of town. Had I known he was a Republican, to your question, Elizabeth, ask, what's your party affiliation? What's your ideology? Because had I known that, I wouldn't. Because he made
political question, ma'am. You can't pose the political question.
I can.
I mean, you can, but I wouldn't answer it because it's not in the realm of my profession. So you have to face reality here. Those questions, maybe the mayor can ask, but you can ask the question, but he don't have to answer. And you can't hold that against the person.
You can ask, and I'm going to ask. And the reality is, Mr. Bell, in all due respect, the reality is that actuality needs to change. Mm-hmm. And so when you have somebody says, let me just say this, when you have somebody say what James E. Craig said, that he voted for Donald Trump twice, knowing that Donald Trump gutted the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ.
I just got to intervene, ma'am. Come on. Yeah. James Craig was a good chief. His politics is now what it is. Don't indict him of 8 years of police service in the city of Detroit. And I'm not a James Craig fan per se, but I'm looking at the body of work that he was able to do in Detroit. So I just believe
I'm talking about the body of work he did when he was here in Cincinnati.
Let me jump in.
Exactly.
Let me jump in and target Miss Karen Courtright, who's one of our community activists.
Thank you, Kevin. I wanted to ask Mr. Bell, you made a statement about only police officers or former police officers can pass judgment on police conduct. I disagree with that, but I'm very interested in what makes you say that. For example, in the military, there's civilian leadership that passes judgment on military action. And in many fields of work, there are accountability bodies that are not comprised of the profession that they're evaluating. So I'm just wondering what the rationale is.
I don't think I said that, ma'am. I clarify for the record. I just indicated that in most instances of police department across this country, internal affairs do the investigation of police officers. It's not civilians. Internal affairs. These are police officers. You see it on TV all the time. But in the real world, they handle those type of criminal investigations. So that's the reality. I didn't say that police are on, but there's no civilian body. There are very one or two. Chicago have example inspector general somewhat to some extent, and LA have to some extent in terms of, but the core of discipline investigations handled by police officers. We handle our body of office chief investigator is civilians, and we have some retired officers there, but that's handling non-civil, non-criminal complaint. So that clarify my position on that matter? Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
and
Mr. Bell is correct on that. However, our Citizens Complaint Authority does do investigations with police involved shootings and matter of discrimination. What they do not do is discipline. They offer up recommendations for discipline and recommendations on policies when there's a pattern in practice. So there are organizations out here that do investigations alongside internal.
Like I said, it's progressive in those areas. I respect that. I wish we had that authority.
yeah, and the discipline is governed by the police union contract.
Yes.
In Seattle, their citizen oversight does hand out discipline in Seattle. So there are some agencies. So it is flipping. The tide is turning.
It's small in number. That's one of the civil rights movement of policing civilian. They don't have that authority to really have discipline and shootings and force issues. They don't have that authority. That's citywide, I mean countrywide. You are unique, a couple other cities are unique, but overall, that's the study that reflect we don't have that authority.
Well, Evanston can be unique as well.
Hopefully so. We're a different, but you know, Evanston is and I want to first we have 9 minutes. Others with questions, let me target other people. Nick Korzanowski, he's a former candidate for alderman. Do you have a question? I'm gonna call you out.
You are, right? I guess my big question would be how do you see citizen oversight best working when we feel that the chief has made an error or a mistake? How do you feel the best way to reach out and engage that person, whoever it might be, and hopefully correct that mistake? How do you feel is the most effective way to do something like that and sort of right the ship?
Do you want to answer?
Go ahead.
If I have the Cincinnati Black United Front, if we have a concern to that magnitude, we will take it to the city manager, the chief executive officer of the city. She's the chief's boss to carry that concern. Now, the chief did make a decision 2 years ago, and it was when an officer used a racial slur, and the citizen filed a citizen's complaint, right? The officers called her the N-word. He didn't say the N-word, he called her a nigger. And so she filed a complaint. Well, the FOP president went and found another case 2 years prior that had happened where an officer called a group of people nigger, right? And the chief had already supported the Citizens Complaint Authority in a discriminatory complaint. Well, since it had already gone downward, where officer didn't get the discriminatory, it was a discourteous that he had gotten, the chief had to reverse it then. I then went to the city manager and said, we need to change the entire policy that prohibits racial slurs from being used by any city employee. So we're still battling that right today. So there are multiple ways to get to where you want to change policies for public safety, people who are in those, in those uniforms, and any city worker.
As I stated, the chief worked for the mayor under the mayor leadership. You have to put pressure politically on the mayor in lawsuit. Basically, the chief worked for the mayor. When he become a liability, the chief become a liability, they're gone. But that's over the period of time. They're just not gonna carry you. But some big issue, they look at the historic, what's happening in this country last 5 years, how police chief are normally lasting 3 or 5 years. Basically, that's the turnover. Craig lasts 8 years in Detroit. But getting back to the mayor, now we made more progress. When people talk about black and white, we had black mayors all the way from 74 up into 2014. Now we got a white mayor, 2014. And we have made more progress in police reform under his leadership because he understands the postal concerns. So I'm not hung up in reference to the concerns, but I know as a predominant Black police department, we put pressure, regardless of your race on the department, we find Black officers just as guilty or involvement as some of the white officers. So we have to look at accountability there, but that's been historically, we have to look at accountability. And that's when we raise the red flag. We might not be able to fire them, but we can put enough community pressure on the mayor in reference to that's what you can do. And lawsuits involved, anything that you feel, but you got to have that ongoing dialogue. They have to know the pulse of the community. They have to be engaged. Then the mayor or the city manager, a whole different animal. But the mayors understand you got the council. They impact the budget in short. Those people impact the budget in terms of what's finalization, what the police salary, what in a lawsuit. They sign on all of that. But you find that in our city, they are silenced on that issue. They are silenced on that. We're talking about the majority Black council. They are silent on that issue in terms of lawsuit. They don't even want to discuss it.
Let me, we have five minutes and I want to give Ms. Esther time to thank our guests, but I have one, unless there's another, oh, is that Liz? Liz, you have a question? We can get you in for the final question.
No, I was just wondering if we might want to ask Darlene if she has a question, since she was also an aldermanic candidate.
Yes, it's Darlene, aldermanic candidate. Do you have a question?
Yes, so it's a two-part question. I was wondering, Patricia Gregory, what was when you went to your elected official, I'm assuming that you went to him first about the neighbor, and then you didn't get a response, and so then you went to the police chief?
You're on mute, Sister Gregory. You're on mute, Sister
Okay.
Gregory.
Got you. So this is what I did, because I am this person where I just don't sit and wait for somebody to come back. So I went to the alder person, told him what was going on. So he told me who to reach out to at the police department. And then, so I did do that. And then I noticed that this family had a deep rooted connection with the police department. Okay. So, I stopped working with him and I called the alderman and he kept sending me back to the police department, but I'd already figured out that that's not the role. So I had to play really dumb, like, oh, okay, well, fine. Yeah, I'm going to call you, but I'm going here too. So I actually went downtown Evanston to Affordable Portables. And I was talking to the lady there because my husband had COVID and I had to like change everything in the house because he was in the hospital. And I was telling her, because I was so frustrated with it, she said, I know exactly who you're talking to. So this is what you need to do. You need to call the attorney general, because, you know, the brother is deeply connected and the family used to own a business in the area. So what you do is go to the attorney general. She said, I know the family, and she was white. Okay. And I said, okay. And that's exactly what I did. And I tell you, I called the attorney general in the morning, and in the afternoon, they was moving his butt right out of here. Do you hear me? It was really quick, fast, and in a hurry. Although
he moved out of the neighborhood? He moved
Oh, yeah. But
okay, that's what I was wondering. Okay.
Yeah, no, he moved quickly. His brothers came, they apologized, all that stuff, and moved his butt right out of there. I was so happy. And I went down and I bought the lady some lunch. I was just happy that she even suggested that, because this guy had tormented us the whole time. And I'm like, you know, I am a educator. I want to keep my job, but in a minute I'm gonna wind up at Cook County Jail because I'm gonna hurt this man. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
And so,
yeah. He threw garbage all in my yard. He was really harassing me. You know, I'm like, oh, I can't take this. So
right, because I just wonder, Iris, I mean Miss Rowley, if
Iris is fine. That's beautiful.
okay, okay. I mean, because obviously, you know, we have a problem with our elected official, but I guess what mechanisms could we have used to have, made him do his job, because that's basically is that the elected, she should have been able to go to the elected official. He would have went to the police chief and it would have been taken care of. She shouldn't have had to go outside of Evanston to handle something in Evanston. So that's, kind of what I wanted to know what your perspective is.
And I promise, Kevin, I won't go long. And I know 20 years, it's difficult to try to talk about these things in such a short amount of time where there's efficacy and people really do get the understanding. And I do want to say this, it is as tough as Mr. Bell says, but the fortitude of the people, the power is within the people, and you have to stay there and rest there. You have to. It is more of us than it is policing in the country. And that is what's so perplexing about this crazy relationship that they have with us. In order to solve crime, you need the help of the community. So I'm always confused by the way that they handle things. It's just like, but we should be working in tandem. However, some people, Darlene and Miss Esther, I'm just going, in my mind, I'm saying to myself, you're giving me permission to be as honest as I want to, and I am going to say this. Sometimes people got to die. People got to lose jobs. People have to move away. We've cost a lot of city officials their job. We used to have a safety director. We got rid of him because he wasn't doing his job. And in that process of doing that, people became aware of what their elected officials were and were not doing. So there's collateral damage here. And as I said, it wasn't just us. And the beauty of what happened in Cincinnati in the early 2000s is that Cincinnati woke up. In April of 2000, it's like the heavens woke up and said, okay, y'all, be in the streets.
It's time.
Fight for your life. It is time. It was 80 degrees. And if you've ever been in Cincinnati in April, you can experience all 4 seasons, right? And so it was 80 degrees. We were running around in t-shirts and shorts, but it is hard, deliberate, intentional work. And sometimes people will stay around and you'll see them come back around. But what I want you to focus on is the prize. And the prize is what you're focused on right now. And I know I got a lot to say and a lot to give because we have impacted all 5 boroughs of policing in Cincinnati. It ain't been easy. I'm not still well liked. There's some folk that be like, here she comes. But I pay taxes. And I said in the beginning of this call, I want a return on my investment on multiple levels. I am a business owner. I'm contributing. And so my voice gets to be heard. And I represent a whole constituency of people that rest inside of that collaborative agreement. So all of these things kind of fall in line, Darlene. You would be surprised how people will come up to you and say, well, I noticed that this legislator didn't vote for this particular piece of legislation, and that made sense. I'm not going to vote for them again. That's how things move. We need to engage young folk because the innovation and the way, the speed at which they can make things move nowadays through the internet is quicker than you and I can blink. I'm proud that Miss Esther sent me a text in the chat. I'm like, go on, mama. It took my granddaughter to show me how to do that in Zoom last year when I started these calls. She said, push this button, grandma. So, but that is what all these recipes that are in the pot in order to change, shifts and change and cultures, because we're talking about a culture here. We're talking about a culture that has not been impacted in the way that serves every citizen in Evanston, Illinois. And that is the order of the day.
Well, I
Thank you.
I want to say thank you all. I want to thank everybody for attending. We could probably go on for another couple hours. One of the bigger issues we didn't get to that we'll get to next time. One of the issues in Evanston is we have 95% of our police officers live outside of our community.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a major issue for this community on a number of levels, but we can get to that at the next session.
Kevin, who owns that though? Is that a state issue or is that a city issue? Because here in Cincinnati, that's a state issue.
It's a city issue. We just in Chicago, it's mandated that you have to live in the city to police the city. And in Evanston and in other communities around us, you can live you don't there's no mandatory residency requirement. But it's
Man.
it's become quite the issue for us because as you spoke to, there's a notion of a lack of accountability on multiple fronts. But I want to give Sister Esther the last word. Thank you, Sister Betty Esther, for your leadership, for your decades of leadership in this space. We celebrate you always. I want to give you the last word.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. And I want to thank everyone that signed in to the Zoom. Even you signed in and didn't ask the question, that's okay. And we will be posting this on our YouTube post, so you can see it again and other people can see it. One thing I do want to say, and we was sending out things and messaging and telling people that we have to be for this and do this, and that if you talk to someone or if you put something on your Facebook, you say, oh, my few friends will see it and I got 20 friends. Then you are opening that, just what you said, up to 220 people, because the scientific analysis of how things are passed, they say one person that you touch somebody else 10 times because it will be passed on. And basically, that is why we have been here and have grown. We have lost some of our people. One of our founding members, Madeline Dupree, she passed away last year, and it was a great loss. She would have loved to have been here to hear you and to know and feel that we can do this. We can do this here in Evanston. We do not have to keep and stick with the powers of be. They, excuse me. And so we know how we have to look at, we know that the city manager oversees the police chief, and then nobody really oversees the city manager. The way Evanston is set up, the city manager is more or less out there on their own, which need to be changed. And we do have the union. The union know that we are pushing to an oversight committee here in Evanston. We have had, at least I have had, some conversation with them, and they are casual, not really saying anything or pushing anything right now, because they are waiting to see when we get this ready and put it out there in the community, how much support are we going to have? If we get lots of support, then they're going to come to the table to talk. We did, in 2017, we did put out and seek people to sign a petition to put our oversight thing on the ballot. And it was roughly about 3 weeks that we did that. And we was able to get way over 400 signatures. And most of those signatures was from young people. They have a stake in it, and I always encourage them and says, you have to be there because this is going to be your ballot. I'm just here, but you have to carry it on. And so, and I speak up, and my kids say, Mama, are you gonna get us in jail today? No, I try not to. And I do, but I have been, I guess, outspoken and everything in every community that I have lived in, from Arkansas when I was little, and then we moved to East St. Louis and spoke out with things there was wrong, and got to see and learn government is supposed to be for the people, by the people. And a friend of mine, Ray Freeman, he's always asking the council, when are we going to have this dialogue that you keep saying we supposed to have? And they do put that on a piece of paper tonight, we're going to dialogue, but they don't do that. So we went to the Zoom. We probably don't do, and I like that what you were saying about having Zoom meetings and regular meetings to engage people. And I think that's something we might think of setting up and doing. But I do appreciate you coming, the both of you. I have had conversation with Mr. Bell about his work with the Nicole people. And I talked to Miss Iris and everything and learned a lot and was connected with, and she helped me, and we did go. Oh, I did connect with a DOG person, and he did work with us for a while. And then he came and he submitted and said to us, well, you have this, now you should submit it to the chief, and he put forth what he wants. And I didn't like the chief, so he was gone. So didn't have the DOG person anymore. But we still here fighting. We do now. We are looking for another chief, and we got to be there because we will be interacting with that person. So we need to have a say in it. And thank you again, everyone. Oh, Iris, do you have your hand up?
No, ma'am, I don't. I think Mr. Rowley, did you want to say anything?
I would just like to say that it's not easy. You're not going to have everybody on board with you, but as long as you have that burning desire within you, the core group, that is contagious and it will carry you forward.
It's amazing now how things don't happen in the city around policing without my phone ringing.
Because it's not always a lot of people that's going to be on board. I mean, we just were determined, and we were determined that accountability was going to be the order of the day in this racist town, pretty much. So Irish talks, you know, it sounds all peachy, but this is a racist little town here. So you just have to put your foot down, just like every town in America, and say, this is mine, this is where I live, this is where my tax dollars are spent, and this is how things are gonna be because I'm a citizen here, quite frankly.
Can I say this too, Ms.? Let me say this. I remember right after Katrina, we went down because we formed the Cincinnati Hurricane Relief Project because we do this kind of stuff. And I remember saying to Reverend Lynch and to my husband, I wish I loved my home as much as folk in New Orleans, and New Orleans love their town, right? Yeah, you've been in New Orleans, you know, folk love their town. And he looked at me and he said, you do. That's why you fight so hard. You just have never actually said it and verbalized it. And so you all have to claim it, stake your claim, be about the work, take all of what you heard from everybody here and massage it to what the needs are in Evanston, Illinois, what your goals, what you plan on doing, get to those young people so they can help you. I had to go out last year and I got some in Cincinnati. I got 15. I think I'm down to 6. And they're the core team. They call themselves the leader of the free worlds. Then they really are my bosses. But there's some learning that they needed to know that they had a pathway to change here, that they didn't have to be in the street, that we already did that for them. And so I say power to you all. We are here anytime you need me.
Well, thank you. And we will be contacting you and Mr. Brown and to stay abreast as to what is going on. So I want to thank everyone that came, and I want to welcome our new board member, Nicholas. Okay, Nicholas, say your last name.
You were close enough, just not saying a thing. Kordanowski.
Kordanowski. Okay, I was practicing Halloween tonight. Don't forget this. And Darlene Cannon and Kevin Brown. We do appreciate you stepping up and accepting our invitation. So thank you very much. And
thank you all. Thank you.
And everybody have a good night.
And Miss Esther, I need to ask Mr. Bell, can I have that middle mask right behind your head, right there? A middle African mask, because I think that one is that from Ghana? Is that a mask from Ghana in the middle there?
Yeah, Ghana, yeah. I've been there. I wanted to visit the motherland. I had that opportunity when I retired. I just want to say, Miss Esther, anything we can do to help you in Evanston, but I learned a whole lot about Cincinnati that I did not know. And you just down the road. I normally just drive through Cincinnati and keep on going. Right, there you go. But I want to say, John Lewis, this is a good trouble. Stay out there and stay in it, because we are here. We are the future, but our real future is for our young people, as you mentioned. And don't get complacent because we think we're putting Black folks in power. I don't look at race in that sense. That's why we have Obama in the White House, right? That's why we have a former vice president under his leadership in the White House. So Trump said, bump their head when they get in the scout car. Justice Department went to sleep. Attorney General went to sleep. Now Biden and Harris is picking up that mantle, so we must take advantage of it. And that is my last statement. And thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate that in terms of learning about this and everything. It's been a healthy discussion. So thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Yes, sir.
Don't forget to send me my mask, Mr. Bell. You can come on back to Cincinnati.
I had to look out for you.
With that said, I'll bid everybody a good evening. Be safe, be well, stay prayed up. All right.
Yes, indeed.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, Miss Esther. Good to see you.